Hello and welcome everyone from around the world, whoever is connecting with us from across Europe, from around the world. This is a conference entitled From Gothenburg to Porto. This is on the eve of the social summit here in Porto, Portugal. This is sponsored by the group of Socialists and Democrats as well as the Party of European Socialists, and it is putting this action plan to action. There is an action plan for the social summit. What will we see in the Porto Declaration? How much of the S&D Declaration on Porto, how much of that can be in that final Porto Declaration that the 27 leaders of the European Union are going to be talking about tomorrow? That is why it's important for us. We're going to be talking to prime ministers, all kinds of speakers, from prime ministers to commissioners to mayors to people on the ground in the middle of this COVID crisis. How are we going to get Europe back from this COVID crisis, build back better? And how many of those things in this declaration will actually be targets with teeth? That's also a big question we got to deal with. So joining us on this first panel are, from my left to right, Luisa Salguero, Mayor of Matosinhos. This is the area where the port is. Mayor, welcome to you. Also, there is, of course, Irache Garcia Perez. You are president of the Socialists and Democrats in the European Parliament. Sergei Stanishev, you are president of the Party of European Socialists, PES, and an S&D group member as well. And we have Commissioner from the European Commissioner Nicholas Schmidt, European Commissioner for Jobs and Social Rights. Welcome to all of you. I might give a couple of tech tips for all of those watching. Keep in mind the hashtag EU Social Summit 21, hashtag EU, hashtag social rights. Those two hashtags, if you hear a good soundbite, please cast it wider. Let's hear from you. Let's hear from you. And let's keep in mind, we have interpretation, lots of interpretation in English, French, German, Spanish, and Portuguese. So you can listen in all those different languages. And the agenda today, we have these opening remarks with this first panel. Then we have a town hall with people actually on the ground who are working to bring us back from that COVID crisis. We have a panel on a fair recovery. And then we have keynote speeches and closing remarks. A very high-level panel there with calls to action on this eve of the Porto Summit. Let us begin with a host of this event, Mayor Salguero.
Hello.
Welcome. Bom dia.
Welcome to you. I wish you all the welcome to Matosinhos. It's an honor and a pleasure for us to receive all the socialist family here. It's a pleasure. I hope you enjoy. We choose a nice place to receive you. It's a beautiful sunny day.
We have great weather here today.
Nice day to work on social rights of all European people. So I wish you to say hello to Irache Garcia Perez, Sergei Stanishev, and Nicholas Schmidt. As I said, it's an honor for us. And if you don't mind, I will talk in Portuguese. Gostaria de vos dar as boas-vindas.
Welcome, everyone.
Yes.
I know there is interpreting, so it is a pleasure to welcome you. We chose this venue. This is the cruise ship terminal of Matosinhos, and from here we can see the fishing harbor, and we are the second largest fishing harbor in the country, but we also have a research center here for sea sciences. So it represents science and innovation, but also tradition. We have had the concern of building an inclusive society, and in these times of pandemic, we were able to build an intensive care unit from scratch. In 30 days, we were able to certify and distribute masks throughout the entire population. We have always this concern of building a modern Matosinhos, but also an inclusive Matosinhos. So it is an honor to welcome you and to see that here from Matosinhos, we can welcome and we can inspire this great European meeting, social meeting, and we hope that we can learn from the work that is being conducted here, but that the work of inclusion that we've been doing here in Matosinhos can be used for what is being done. You could have not chosen a better location. We are used to a wind, a northern wind that is very strong, but we believe that it also will help us to communicate. It's always a pleasure to welcome the socialist family, and I wish you a fruitful day. Thank you.
I hope the winds of change will blow in the right direction tomorrow. And Irache, let's get your opening comments. I think this is a very important moment. This is, for many, a very crucial moment. Tomorrow, what is going to happen. Let's set the stage and send out a strong voice.
Thank you. Thank you. Obrigada, alcaldesa. Queridos amigos.
Dear friends, first, I would like to say that I'm very happy to be here today in Matosinhos, in Porto. I'm very glad that the first meeting since the pandemic started, it's here in Portugal. In an open city, a city of poets and sculpture that led in the 19th century the fight for a constitutional democracy. And because of the Prime Minister, Antonio Costa, the name of Porto from tomorrow on will be associated to a social Europe, a fair Europe of social rights. That needs to touch all Europeans. Here in Porto, we start the trip to reach our goals to improve the lives of people. People should not be the ones that sacrifice themselves to improve the economy. And in Portugal, we can show that it is possible. We all remember how the financial crisis of 2008 affected the countries. They were made believe that austerity was the only way to make sacrifice until the storm was over. But the sacrifices are always asked of the same people, and while ones were making sacrifice, the others were getting more rich, the richer and the poorer, and the working class saw how their quality of life was getting worse. And then we get the progressive government of Antonio Costa, breathing oxygen into the population. And with a social and responsible policy, it was the example that the Socialist and Democrat family needed, that we could move forward, economically speaking, without leaving anyone behind. We cannot leave people drowned in the sacrifices, in the medical expenses, an economy that does not destroy the environment. We now need to talk about a model that takes opportunities to all peoples in regions. New technologies cannot enslave us. Technical development and progress should result in a better life for people. We know this because our parties have fought this and have fought for social rights for more than a century, since the first industrial revolution. So now we have to invest in education, in health, in social rights, in people with disabilities, and strengthening the social state, and to fight also for gender equality and to end the gender gap in remuneration. We cannot talk about a fair Europe otherwise. And in the last few years haven't been easy, and to move forward with a social agenda. And with the pandemic, we see that only with strong social policies can we face a crisis like this. We need a new network, a true network, to save Europeans from poverty. And in the 21st century in Europe, we cannot have children starving below the poverty line. And 1 in every 4 children in Europe is at risk of social exclusion. Otherwise, the European Union will no longer make sense. What will be its purpose if we cannot improve the lives of people? We have a golden opportunity to change things. Citizenship is asking that of that, and only socialists and democrats can do it. From social governments with the European Union, but also with the municipalities, with the mayors, with the associations. That's why this is so important, because only with the commitment and the energy of everyone can we make this transformation possible. We can make the pandemic a turning point, and we should remember the city here, Porto, as a place of hope where we start fighting for a more social and more humane Europe. Thank you.
Shift over to Sergei Stanishev, President of the Party of European Socialists. You know, we're talking about the road from Gothenburg to here.
Yeah.
Gothenburg was a summit that talked about social issues, that set these sort of objectives. How does it feel now to have come this far? How far have we come? How far have we not come at this point?
Well, first of all, let me welcome all the participants in our debate, not only in our panel, but all the members of the family. And I'm especially happy that we are organizing this conference together with Irache, the leader of our group in the European Parliament, and all other stakeholders in the family. Because this event indeed is a long-awaited one for our political family. And I will give you one example. It took almost 9 years from the previous economic crisis to have a social summit back in 2007.
That's too long.
Too long. And actually, we needed the initiative of a social democratic prime minister, Stefan Löfven, to impose this agenda, as we do now have the initiative of the Portuguese presidency and the one of Antonio Costa to have a second social summit. And I remember very well the 2017 proclamation with 20 principles. It was a very important step forward. But Nicholas knows very well that from the first day, we as a family were saying, this is good, this is important, this shows the right priorities, because social issues should be in the very core, heart of European policies. But this is not enough. This is why we wrote 2 weeks before the summit of 2017 a letter to the prime ministers insisting of an action plan. And I'm very happy to see Nicholas here, already in his new capacity as the Commissioner of the European Union, who put on the table an action plan, finally. And we as Social Democrats are to celebrate the debate which will happen today in our family, because we were the driving force at every stage of this process, and tomorrow and the day after tomorrow with the prime ministers, the trade unions, the civil society, because we need to show the citizens of Europe the right priorities.
That we're putting this action plan to action.
Yes,
right?
Exactly. And look, we all went through a difficult period in the last year. COVID-19 destroyed whole sectors of economy. People are insecure about their future, and they are expecting the European Union to show that there will be no more business as usual. And this is where we are moving to. And if you look at social democracy, what it is about, it's about social equality, it's about economic protection, it's about gender equality, it's against any form of discrimination, and we need the tools. This is why I'm happy that the action plan, which was produced by Nicolas, has so many concrete tools, because people want to see that things will change, and they don't have too much patience. And it's time to act and to deliver. This is our goal, and this, I hope, will happen in the debates tomorrow and the day after tomorrow.
Sergei Stanishev, thank you very much. Thank you. Let us move to the Commissioner, Nicholas Schmidt. You do have to speak for 27 countries in a way, right? I mean, it's a bit tricky, but we are here as an S&D and PES event to talk about the objectives that the S&D and PES would like to accomplish, and what we realistically could see tomorrow. How optimistic are you that some of those elements from the Socialists and Democrats' declaration, their action plan, can actually go into the EU action plan, the Porto Declaration?
Well, first, I'm really happy to be here among friends, and it is for our family really an important and great moment. And well, I'm not really speaking for 27 member states. I'm speaking for the Commission, and I'm speaking as a social democratic commissioner. So, I must say, it's a long way to Porto. It was a long way to Gothenburg. But all the important progresses which have been achieved on social Europe, they all were due to socialists. When I remember, and I have a long diplomatic career behind me, I remember when François Mitterrand took the initiative, 89, with Jacques Delors, the Socialist Commission President, to have a Charter of Fundamental Social Rights, 89. It was a Swedish social democratic government that pushed for bringing into the Amsterdam Treaty a chapter on employment. Can you imagine that we had built a monetary union and there was no word on employment? It was the Social Democrats who asked to anchor the employment in the treaties. And again, it was a Social Democrat, Stefan Löfven, who received us in Gothenburg and where this pillar of social rights was endorsed. Now, as you have said, now it's not just about principles, it's about concrete policies.
Yes.
And I must say, first, without a strong social democratic group in the European Parliament, we perhaps would not have got an action plan. Because it was Irache, Sergei, and all the friends in the European Parliament who asked for the action plan in the program of this Commission. And the President of the Commission asked me to work on this action plan. So without our family, we would not have perhaps an action plan. Now we have it, we have worked on it. It's, I think, a real strong, good compromise, a compromise for progress. And now we have to make sure that this action plan is implemented. It's first asked for the Commission to make good proposals. We have started. And again, we have proposed a few weeks ago a child guarantee. Who asked for the child guarantee? It's Sergei. Years ago, he was pushing for the child guarantee. The minimum wage, even if it's sometimes debated among ourselves, nevertheless, it's some fundamental demand of our political family, and Franz Timmermans in his campaign pushed very much for that. We made a proposal. Now it's in the Council, it's in the Parliament. But again, it's our group in the Parliament pushing very, very strongly for that. And now it's a question also of persuasion. We know all that there are forces in Europe, among member states, who are not very much happy or not really motivated because they consider that social, that's national. That's not something Europe should deal with, which is wrong. The treaty gives the Commission, gives the European Union certain powers, certain competences in social, but especially also we cannot build a strong economic union, we cannot build an internal market and just leave the social out. This was never the case since the beginning of the European integration process. So we are here, and I thank Antonio Costa a lot for his investment. We talked about that even before I became a commissioner. Now we are here, and it is really an historic moment. Thank you.
Nicola Schmidt, thank you very much, Commissioner. Thank you. Thank you to all of the panel. We have to try to stay on time, so this was wonderful. Thank you very much for your opening comments. This does set the tone for this conference. Thank you, Irache. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you also, Nicholas, and also Sergey. Thank you. So at this point, because of COVID, we have to take a little bit of a moment at the moment to clean these podiums so that we can go to the next panel. And this next panel will be, Can we go to David Sassoli now? Is that possible?
Sì, buongiorno.
Yes?
Yes, hello, good
Buongiorno,
evening.
buongiorno, Presidente. President of the European Parliament. Yes, Mr. Sassoli, hello. Buongiorno.
Grazie.
Thank you very much, hello.
Per lei è un momento molto importante domani. Quanto importante è domani per lei?
Tomorrow we will have a very important moment, but exactly how important?
Of the Council and Prime Minister Costa in particular is something that will enable us to keep faith to our promise. For us, for the socialist family in particular, but I believe for everybody. It is a promise that we made a year ago to our citizens when we told them that we weren't going to leave anybody behind after the crisis. And this is a promise that now requires policies. The panel just before mentioned this. We need actions, we need plans that become realities. We need to keep faith to our promise. Nobody must be left behind, and the crisis cannot hit the weakest in our society. We must enable the European Union to find its true identity again, the idea of citizenship, of equality, which is based on solidarity policies. This is the reason why the Porto initiative is extraordinarily important for us. It's important to our family because for years we have been battling to ensure that the crisis does not strengthen the few, the privileged. And this means that we have to think of everybody who takes initiative and who works and try to avoid absurd income, absurd yields that some people have by bringing more balance. The European Commission has undertaken very important actions. It has launched initiatives on tax reform. It has tried to find balance within the European budget thanks to own resources and new own resources. It has reviewed the Stability and Growth Pact, and I think that as a socialist family and a democratic family, we really need to lead on this reform. We need to fight for it. We cannot go back to old rules, the rules that created too many disparities. In the review and the reform of the Stability and Growth Pact, it is essential to focus on social objectives, on social targets, on inclusive growth, on investing in welfare, in education, in training, and in social protection systems, because these are the things that enable us to have a more resilient society. And this has to be the path we follow. We have to work and we have to undertake all efforts to find decent work for everybody. And this is a reason why the work we're doing even here within the European Parliament on minimum European wages is so important. We know that the crisis has highlighted the fragility of our social chains, and we know that the weakest links of these chains are young people and women, most specifically. These are the people who risk exclusion, and for a long time they may yet be excluded unless we carry out policies in favor of inclusion and solidarity, so as to enable them to face up to all the suffering that this crisis has created for everyone. We, of course, need, as someone said quite rightly, to work on young people, on children, We have so many, too many children who are at risk and who might not be included unless we help them. This is one of the reasons for which the child guarantee has to be one of our main battles to be carried out over the next months. I think our family has the right ideas. I believe that right now we have the strength that we need to change paradigms that before COVID already led us to be a society that was not equal. I can't wait to reach Porto tomorrow. It's a very important meeting, and I look forward to the informal council, and I really look forward to bringing the messages that the Parliament and each and every one of us have tried to bring forward over these last months. In particular, I really want to keep our promise. We really want to make sure nobody is excluded by this crisis. We believe the social pillar and the specific care that the Portuguese presidency has taken to focus for all member states and all European institutions on these issues is really essential to a future for the European Union which is of welfare and well-being for all. Thank you.
David Sassoli, President of the European Parliament. Signor Presidente, molto grazie, grazie tanto. Speriamo che vediamo questo progresso domani a questo summit.
We hope to see that progress tomorrow.
Our next panel, and this is a very important panel because it is called the Town Hall panel. This is where we combine policy makers with people on the ground, on the front line in this COVID crisis who are working very hard to help bring us back and help bring us back better, as we all would like to do. This is going to be a hybrid panel. With us in the studio is, from my left, Agnes Jongerius, who is S&D Coordinator for the European Parliament Committee on Employment and Social Affairs. And next to her is Manuel Pizarro, the S&D member of the European Parliament's also Employment Committee. And you're also a medical doctor. You are a doctor. And to my left is Ana Mendes Godinho. Welcome, bon dia, Minister of Labor, Solidarity and Social Security of Portugal. Nice to be in your country. It's beautiful here. Yes? Yes. And next to her is Alicia Holmes, President of the Young European Socialists, YES, and the S&D member of the European Parliament, also in the Employment Committee. Very important, Employment and Social Affairs. Now, and joining us virtually, where they're working out there on the ground, is Rafael Arabe Murillo. You are Nurse and Young Workers Representative at the General Union Workers UGT Spain. Then we have Marcin Wojciak, Polish worker in the logistics sector, and a migrant workers representative of the FNV trade union in the Netherlands. And also Dana Lutzendorf, chair of the Central Works Council of the University Hospital Charité in Berlin. In fact, I lived a few blocks away from that and took one of my children there to the emergency room one time. So I thank you and your team all for what you did to help us out. And you are there on the front line still. So why don't we get started here with Agnes. Agnes, let me ask you, why are we still talking about quality jobs? Quality jobs should have been a thing already established, long ago. Enough already. Let's get it done, right?
Let's get it done, indeed. And I think it's clear that the problems which has been amplified and highlighted in the COVID crisis were there already before. So in-work poverty, people who are minding our children, who are stacking the supermarkets, who are parcel deliveries or Uber drivers, they cannot live from the income. They could not do it during the COVID crisis, but they also couldn't do it before. And I think Here it's important that we indeed say this is something where Europe should be ashamed of. I think it should be the case that when you all work hard trying to provide for your family, you should have a decent income. And therefore I'm happy that instead of the old proposals from the European level, lower the minimum wage, we are now talking about higher minimum wages. And I think it's high time. We are working on it in the European Parliament. Anna is working on it in the European Council. In total, we are talking about 24 million people in Europe who are going to profit from higher minimum wages. And I should say this would have been a task before the crisis, but now in the crisis with the COVID, we all know how important the jobs are, which I just mentioned. So let's get it done.
And let's talk to one of these people working out there in the field, Rafael Arabe Murillo, a nurse in Spain. Rafael, what about this idea of precariousness? You're on the front line fighting COVID, and yet you're still experiencing great precariousness at work. Can you tell us about that? Do you hear me okay, Rafael? Buenos días.
Hola, buenas tardes. No sé si...
Good afternoon. I hope you can hear me. So,
Perfecto. Bueno, en primer lugar...
First, I would like to thank the opportunity to participate. It seems important here, and what we've been talking about. The importance of valuing what should be the European social pillar. And the pandemic, of course, affected this, and for me it affected as a nurse and as a young person, a European citizen. This is an important challenge. We really need a strong social pillar, because if we don't have an important social pillar that does not provide for the needs of our people, the European Union is a project that will end. This crisis has been difficult. What can you say of how is your day? How is it difficult for you to work amidst this crisis? The difficulties that I have faced the most is the precariousness. And the remuneration and the policies that we have seen here, for example, in Madrid, we had right-wing policies something that I have reflected on of the social pillar, that we are looking at it in Europe, we're looking at it by 2030. And so 10 years, I've been already working for 12 years since I finished my studies, and I don't have a permanent contract yet. We're talking about very precarious contracts, 15 days a week. It's very difficult to be able to accomplish all you want. And, well, we have to think that we are provided an essential service. And I'm not the only one facing these issues. All of the people that now work in the front line are facing this situation. Thank you. What do you think of his experience as a doctor? Yes, during the first wave of the pandemic, I returned to my hospital of São João to work as a doctor. And in the times of uncertainty, even fear, what impressed me was the courage and determination of professionals, especially young professionals, doctors, nurses, never abandoned the front line. And if Portugal has very positive results in fighting the pandemic, we can thank these professionals and young professionals that showed all of this dedication. They showed that the NHS, that is one of the greatest achievements of our democracy, is something worth fighting for, so we can all have a quality health. But also because of that, now we have the obligation of valuing the careers of health professionals. There are high-wear professions. They face high stress. We need to look them with respect and to solve professional integration problems. We have to strengthen autonomy and technical leadership of professionals.
Concretely, I wish I could speak Portuguese, sorry.
It's better to speak in English.
Okay, thank you. What concretely would you like to see tomorrow in your dreamo vision in the Porto Declaration on Social Rights?
Eu gostaria de ver uma...
I would like to see a reference to professional careers, professional leadership, the valuing of public services, namely the NHS. The Next Generation EU in Portugal will enable great investment in the National Health Service. And that's very important, to invest in infrastructure, equipment, but the largest investment is in professionals. We have to be able to take care of those who will take care of us.
Let me shift over to someone else out in the field, Marcin Wojciak. Marcin, dzień dobry, do you hear me?
Hello, dzień dobry.
There you are. Hello. You're a temporary worker in the Netherlands. You're from Poland, and that happens a lot. There are a lot of people migrating from one European country to the other, right? And you work in the Netherlands over the last 3 years now. What does it mean to be a migrant worker today to you?
First of all, I'd like to thank you for inviting me here. It's a big honor to speak to such good ladies and gentlemen who could improve our lives. Yes, as you said, I've been here for over 3 years. It's not easy to describe it in such a quick, short time. However, to give you just indication of it, we are facing a number of problems, mostly are related with our accommodation and jobs, obviously. We have unfair dismissals, we're facing evictions, we are struggling with getting enough work to make our budgets. Also, unrealistic production norms that leads to we are too tired to perform, really. And because of that, we feel exploited. That leads me to the feeling we have by the treatment we receive of a second-class citizens.
As a migrant worker in another country, that's how you feel, right?
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah. And this summit tomorrow, what would you like to see that summit include to address those concerns about the quality of work, about minimum wage, about fair treatment?
Yes, minimum wage is one of the things we would like to been discussed. Also, we've been talking about separating double roles of work agencies, which means that they have a power over us by providing us with accommodation and jobs at the same time. What happens is, if you lose your job, you are homeless almost next day. Also, when we come over here, we expected to get enough work to do so. We really struggling with the fact that our contracts are built that way that we have 0 hours guaranteed, at least for the first month. After that, after first month, it's not even getting better, it's just slightly better, but that situation shouldn't have happened.
Okay.
So proper contracts and also health and safety at work, this is a huge issue as well.
Right. Marcin, dziękuję bardzo. I hope to come back to you. Let's shift over to Ana Mendes Godinho, which, I mean, I might mention too that many Portuguese were migrants for a long time as well, went, working in France and other parts of Europe as well. So lots of stories, I'm sure, among your family and relatives as well.
Direct family, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So in this time of economic crisis, do we need to choose between quality jobs or job creation? Why can't we have both?
Well, first of all, hello, Chris. Welcome to Porto. In this, I hope and I expect, historical moment for Europe that we need so much to have this strong shake in our priorities
and
putting the social dimension in the basis of our European spinal cord. Answering your question, we learned from the past that it's not through austerity that we solve problems, and that we grow together and that we grow as Europe. I do think that Europe will only be Europe if people believe and trust. And this is a moment. This is the moment to guarantee that we are giving everyone the voice they need and that we are acting. The Portuguese presidency has assumed this motto, time to deliver with concrete actions, and that's what we'll have. Hopefully tomorrow, for the first time, going from Gothenburg, which was so important to have the 20 principles of Gothenburg, going from principles to action, and for the first time involving everyone. We need a clear message involving everyone to answer concrete expectations of real people. I do think Europe needs this message for real people with a message of quality jobs. Only through quality jobs we will have an Europe that will deliver trust, confidence, and that will promote social peace. There's no alternative to social peace besides quality jobs. And quality jobs are quality jobs that guarantee fair wages, good and fair working conditions, but also that guarantee competitiveness. In the world of transition, where we are discussing transition, the double digital and green transition, we need people. And that's what makes Europe different from the other continents. It's a continent based in people and their rights. We cannot treat other people in another way that we would not treat ourselves. And this pandemic showed how we must act in a different way to tackle what the pandemic showed, not only, of course, the new challenges we have, but the old problems we have in the field. Precarious work, young people who are right now desperate looking for a job, but for a decent job, a quality job, a sustainable job. We need a sustainable employment compromise, a new compromise at a European level where we create the effective conditions, of course, creating instruments, regulatory instruments, financial instruments, with conditions, of course, also to support quality jobs in the several dimensions. Again, the alternative to this is to stop social peace.
Okay. Minister, thank you very much. Let's go back out into the field and talk to Dana Lutskendorf. Dana, can you hear me over at Charité Hospital? Grüße Sie.
Can hear you, yes.
Hello. What are the challenges for hospital workers, according to you? I mean, what's it like working amid this COVID crisis among you and your colleagues?
Ja, also ich werde auf Deutsch.
Ja, können Sie, das geht. Ja, ja, okay.
Okay. Dann, ja, also danke, dass ich was aus meiner Erfahrung erzählen darf, wie es jetzt ist, in der Pandemie zu arbeiten. Aber ich möchte auch kurz berichten, ich bin ja seit über 20 Jahren intensiv.
But I would like to say briefly that I've been working as a nurse for over 20 years in an intensive care unit. And I see that the resources, the human resources, have been reduced all over the years. Our workload is greater because there is a major pressure upon the costs. We must take care of more and more patients. The schedules become shorter. The regions do not invest properly. And now, well, as for the pandemic, we have this additional workload. We have never had so much activity. It's understanding a lot of people dying. As I said, I work in an intensive care unit with the COVID ward. And what I see there, what I've seen there, it's really psychic, in terms of psychology and physics, very difficult. There was a survey among my colleagues. 1 out of 6 health workers have psychological problems. They want to change into a different job. Are you getting me? Another survey showed that over 50% would come to this job, but only with better conditions. Thank you very much. I would like to come back to you, but I don't know if we have enough time.
President of the Young European Socialists, what does this new crisis mean for young people's jobs? We had a webcast earlier this week with S&D talking to youth, young socialists, and they're very concerned about their future. I guess you are too.
Yes. Bueno, buenas tardes a todos y a todas y obrigada por me dar la palabra y obrigada por me convidar para participar en este evento na cidade de Porto. Contestando directamente a tu pregunta, Chris, yo creo que nos encontramos en un...
To answer your question directly, Chris, I believe that we are at a turning point, not only due to the challenges that the COVID crisis poses to our economies, labor markets and states, but because we ran the real risk of losing our best educated generation. A generation that sees a higher unemployment rate, higher than any other age group, that sees increasingly difficult to find a quality job, and finds it difficult to start their own life project. It's difficult to get into the labor market, losing their competencies, but above all, they may lose their faith. The faith in the system, faith first in themselves and then in the system. And this is something we cannot afford as a society. We must think of this as a global challenge and not just a challenge for a specific generation. If Europe dreams to lead a green, digital and inclusive transition, the contribution of young people is essential to revitalize rural regions, innovate an economy, consolidate democracy and ensure a sustainable future. The younger generations are demanding for a new model of society that prioritizes the social dimension and puts people at the center. It has not been easy, but I think that the European Union has finally understood this. and Erasmus Plus, ESF Plus, the Child Guarantee, and all other financial programs as the mechanism, as the resilience facility. I hope that this Porto Summit will serve as a turning point and as a guide to strengthen and consolidate the social Europe that the young people are calling for. Thank you.
Or some final comment, because I'm trying to regain time here, but I mean, from everything you've heard, as a doctor here, can you sum it up? What needs to be brought across to those 27 leaders tomorrow from what we heard during this panel?
Eu acho que o que a pandemia.
I think that what the pandemic leads us to conclude is that the overwhelming majority of the European citizens wants a greater involvement of the EU on social issues and also on health issues. Hopefully, the European leaders may hear the European citizens because the diseases have no borders, as the pandemic showed us. And the fact is that will be far more effective managing the resources to improve our health if we are able of managing them all together with common goals, bridging the gaps of inequalities. This pandemic unveiled social inequalities, and they are a burden upon our health. The pandemic hit far more those with economic fragilities, with social fragilities, and we are supposed to consolidate the European pillar of social rights, saying that we must have preventive and healing health cares that everybody can afford. So we must move forward within the European Union of Health, so that it may become something specific. Of course, we have major steps that have been given due to the European Parliament, the Youth for Health, the European Plan Against Cancer, new measures to fight labor accidents. But we are all aware that much more must be done. This is why the socialists meet together to have more health within the European Union for all.
On the panel and also virtually out there in the field, thank you so much for joining us on this panel one on how it is to work in the field and what should be done tomorrow, what should be in that Porto Declaration regarding work. So that was a very important part of this conference on the eve of the Porto Summit. Thank you very much to this panel, and let's prepare then for the next panel, which is going to be on time for a fair recovery. Should we get back to just business as usual, or should we change the situation? How should we build back better and build back in a way that employees are going to be treated fairly? Should we have a minimum wage? Should we have a child guarantee, a youth guarantee? You know, to what extent should it be perhaps binding? Should we just have targets, or should we have targets with teeth? That is the big question as we look at those issues today. Workers, regions, countries in the EU, generations, these inequalities among all of these. How do we close the gap of these inequalities in so doing? There's not enough housing for a lot of people. The working conditions, like you just heard, are very difficult, and also that aspect of the digital transition. Many people working digitally, and there's that big issue of the right to disconnect. Should they have the right to disconnect? Do they always have to be connected round the clock, working for whomever it is and answering whoever's messages? So a lot of issues here to deal with. This COVID crisis has brought to the fore so many of these issues that perhaps were brewing for quite a while, but it's intensified all of this through that digital, through the COVID crisis. Okay, why don't we get started with our next panel. On my left, Hubertus Heil, Federal Minister of Labor and Social Affairs of Germany, Grüße Sie, and Vasco Cordero. You are the first Vice President of the European Committee of Regions, COR, and member of the group of the Party of European Socialists, PES group. in the COR. Right. And I think joining us virtually, do we have Helene Fritzon? Are you there with us? Hi, Helene. You're the Group Vice President, S&D Group Vice President. Welcome. And a member of the Employment and Social Affairs Committee. We've already spoken before on other webcasts. It's great to see you again. Let's start with you about the aspirations of young people. Let's start there, because we did talk to young people earlier this week on a webcast. Their aspirations and how to meet those aspirations with this social summit.
Thank you so much, Chris, and good evening. I would have liked to be in Porto, but I'm still in Sweden, and I'm happy to be with you tonight, and I look forward to the debate, discussion, and also to the conference tomorrow. For me, as a social democrat, a fair recovery is a recovery that is based on unity and solidarity, and we need inclusive measures ensuring no one is left behind. And as you mentioned, Chris, I especially think about all the young people, because looking at the current situation, it is clear that getting back to business as usual is not an option. Citizens of Europe also demands something else. We can look at the young people's aspirations when it comes to the climate change. You know, in Sweden we have Greta, and she has inspired a lot of young people all over the world. And we can look at the figures from a recent Eurobarometer, clearly showing that 9 in 10 Europeans consider a social Europe to be important to them, where the most pressuring issues are equal opportunities and access to the labor market, access to fair working conditions, and also access to a high quality of health. So I can see the will for change, and to achieve this, we must find new solutions for the future. We need to build the new economy, the new green economy, and to put in concrete terms, I think it's about creating a society based on social values and equality. And of course, for me, it's very important, and for our political family, it must be based on gender equality. We have a report in the European Union that shows that if we not do more than we do today, we will have the gender equality, we will have a big gap, and we don't reach a gender equality based Europe before 60 years. And I have a granddaughter, she is 7 years old, and I don't want her to wait until she is 67. So we have a hard work to do together,
right.
And I think it's our political family that can change it.
Okay.
We need a lot of things to do together to achieve this. We must eliminate in work poverty and close the gender pay gap. We must promote job creation. We must fight social exclusion and tackling poverty, in particularly, as mentioned here before, child poverty. The European Child Guarantee is an excellent step, a good tool in this direction. And we must support children in need all over Europe. And we must ensure the social dimension of the ongoing climate change. And
Okay.
of course, again, push for gender equality.
Okay, Helen, thank you very much. I'm so sorry I've had to move quickly to the Minister, Hubertus Heil. Was ist für Sie eine faire Erholung? Was sind die Hauptprioritäten der EU, um Gleichheit und soziale Sicherheit zu gewährleisten?
What is fair recovery? To ensure justice and ability. Are we still within the crisis? What have we learned? There are things that will keep us occupied, not just the health department. We have in Germany the layoff short-term scheme because there are many people losing their jobs. And there are other crises. We should have insurance. We need to create bridges. We need to fight for every job, and we do that through the youth guarantee. In Germany, we have a specialized tool precisely for that. And it's not just about lessons learned. This can also trigger structural changes in the labor market, in terms of also the demographic structure of society. And you need to have a fair framework for collective bargaining. And we need to fight so that the workers, professionals in the front line, don't get just applause, but fair remuneration for all the work that we're doing. We have, of course, shortcomings, but we're not the worst state in the world. We need to have upskilling, reskilling to ensure that the workers and the professionals of today can do the jobs of tomorrow. And we also have that dream of a labor insurance focus on employability, helping people that are working and the ones that are also facing possible unemployment. We have seen several challenges. We had in 2008 the financial crisis, the refugee crisis, that also created a divide in Europe, then Brexit. How can we get out of this new crisis but draw conclusions unless so that we can have a fairer Europe and invest so that in the 20s of this century we can be strengthened. It's important to have the social pillar, but we need to implement it into practice, and this is what we hope.
Minister of Labor and Social Policies. Buonasera, Minister.
Buonasera.
Buonasera. Cosa intende per ripresa giusta? Quali devono essere la priorità del...
What is for you a fair recovery? What are the priorities of the European Union for sustainability and social equality? Everyone was worried that we could go back to what the situation that we had before the pandemic, but I do believe things will be better. Throughout the last few months and year, we have seen an intensified of inequalities. Poorer people got poorer, rich people got richer. Women also paid a high price, and young people, SMEs, the poorer countries, and more vulnerable countries. We want several transitions, and the transitions are a great opportunity. They have to be based on a sense of justice. They cannot produce more inequalities. The digital gap that exists has to be addressed. We can't use digitization to transform society, but We need to have new instruments to guide all of the processes. We'd need a Europe with a common budgetary policy and labor policy. We should have a type of European bargaining for labor, and we need to have instruments for workers. So we can focus on transformation processes for the future. The first instrument will be access to the decisions that affect workers. We also need new instruments. In the directive on the minimum wage is very important. The plan from my colleague Nicholas Smith will also be very important to access the algorithms. We need to be able to understand the algorithms so that the recovery is fair. To conclude, what would be the concrete objectives, something that you would like to see tomorrow at the summit in Porto, something that you wish you could see realized tomorrow? Can you hear me? I believe this is a point of no return. What the pandemic has done is irreversible. So Europe should be able to intervene with its own resources in transformation processes and support all the instruments to reduce inequality. The inequalities already existed but were exacerbated by the pandemic. I think that that step forward is essential and it will be irreversible. Europe has a social dimension, and if we take care of it, if we nurture it, the future will be that of a European democracy where resources are common and are legitimized through democracy. And so that would be a step forward that I think is possible, and socialists have to build new alliances and join all of those who want a fairer transition.
But Vasco Cordero, maybe you can help me with that. First Vice President of the European Committee of Regions, COR, and COR has a consultative role in the European Union, but it is providing that sort of 3D of EU democracy, isn't it? Because it's that grassroots voice from across Europe, that Committee of the Regions, for people from across Europe. So tell us, what is a fair recovery to you?
Well, thank you, Chris, for your question, and you will allow me to answer in Portuguese.
Yes.
First, I would like to say the importance of this meeting. It's not just about the past. It's not just about the path from Gothenburg up to here. It's mostly about the future, because in all circumstances this summit would already be important. But now when we're thinking about recovery, taking into account the COVID-19 crisis, it's even more important and essential. And that is why I am here. representing not just the Committee of European Regions, but it means that the hundreds, millions of local, regional entities throughout Europe, the socialist, progressive politicians of these entities respond to this challenge of helping build a more social Europe. We were already here. We already close, not so close maybe, but close to this situation. What happened with the financial crisis is the best example of what should not be of recovery in this crisis. We have to focus on an essential set of policies that are directly connected to the dignity of people, directly connected to the aspirations of people regarding the European project and the activities of all of the entities they're related to. Local and regional entities represent precisely that. And what I mean to say is that a recovery that says, well, from an economic standpoint, we have a problem, that is the cost of labor. No, that's not fair recovery. A recovery in which we're facing the cost of pensions is too high. That's not fair recovery. Public services need to be trimmed. That's not fair recovery. The essential criterion needs to be not about these things. We have to focus on people, and that is what we need for a fair recovery. Thank you very much.
Let's move on online to Michael Ley, Secretary General of Solidar and the Solidar Foundation. Michael, tell us about, from the trade union standpoint, what is a fair recovery for workers?
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for having me here in this distinguished panel and this event, representing Solidar, a network of progressive civil society organizations across Europe. And I think for trade unions and civil society alike, a fair recovery is one that leads to social justice through a just transition. We build back better towards a new normal, one that prioritizes support to the populations through clear investments, and that have been to the ones that have been suffering most, not only from the current and ongoing health and social crisis, but ever since the austerity measures followed the previous financial crisis, pushing frontline workers, healthcare and social workers, informal workers, unemployed, migrants and refugees, rural and urban communities out of systems of social security, essentially leaving them behind. And these constituencies are also the ones that our members have been supporting throughout this period and in the pandemic, filling the gaps left by a starved public sector and from which the state has essentially withdrawn. And if we are to build a fair recovery, this must lead to the creation of a truly social and sustainable Europe with clear and bold measures both at the European level as well as among member states. And I'm happy to have my colleague and friend from CORE here because, of course, local communities and municipalities have a key role to play in this recovery. COVID has revealed the brutality of pre-existing inequalities and exacerbated them. And the recovery and the resilience plan, the European Green Deal, the European Pillar of Social Rights, coupled with debates of the future of Europe that are starting on Sunday, are opportunities for the EU to meet the expectations on the Union in these trying times. I would say it's a make it or break it kind of situation for the European Union in the eyes of citizens, but already starting to wane in their support for the Union as a political project. So we have a dire task for us in the coming years, and I think Social Summit could be one of those moments when we can take important steps. And I hope to see that as well. Fair in this regard is also taking into account not just the past, the present, but as my colleague said, also the future. And this means coupling the social dimension with the sustainability and the need for a development model that is not pushing us beyond a point of no return. We therefore also would say that a fair recovery is one that ensures that the green and digital transitions contribute to tackling existing as well as future inequalities. If not, that project of a greener Europe will also be not one that fosters a sense of belonging to the European Union, the one that makes the cracks even more visible. An inclusive and holistic approach should remedy this, to make sure that a social Europe cares for all Europeans, no matter where in life they find themselves, and to do so in a sustainable way through just transition that fosters social and democratic participation through civil dialogue and social dialogue.
Okay, Mikael, thank you very much. I'd like to have one last question to the German minister. Hubertus, was in Ihrer Meinung morgen wie optimistisch sind Sie, dass wir diese Elementen von dieser S&D-Deklaration.
How optimistic you are so that we may embody our relationship with S&D. We must work hard in Europe. We have a strong political competition. We speak a lot on the environmental and digital transition, but we don't talk that much on the social transition. And it was important that my Portuguese colleague, Ana Mendes Godinho, and Portuguese Prime Minister Costa, they put a strong focus on this possibility. It's a major possibility for us. It is possible to join this digital transition and the social transition and also the ecological one for all. And may this crisis lead us to a stronger, a greater equality for all. Germany is the union between democracy and the economy. We must shape the future of work equality between men and women. Only the progressive social democrats do that, but we must fight hard, we must work hard, as you said before. And how possible do you think that it is possible to do that with clear targets, real targets that might be implemented? One possibility would be a European framework to create a minimum protection all over the member states. We need this framework, and in Europe we must struggle to get a directive for a minimum income and other social actions. These are two revolutionary measures, and therefore the social pillar may also lead us to specific legislation. You are right, we must go from the values to the actions. So this is the task in front of us, and we are a lot of people, but we must speak louder. It's nice that we are under the presidency of Portugal. It's an inspiring country, and their economic recovery, their recovery after the economic crisis was very important.
How much are you optimistic that we can get targets with teeth in tomorrow's Porto Declaration?
Bem, eu penso que amanhã é uma oportunidade.
I think that tomorrow will be an excellent opportunity for the European leaders to create a practical action. Time to deliver. Time to deliver is now. It's the most important element that seems to me that should be before us. We have no time to waste, both due to the circumstances that led us from Gothenburg to Porto, and also the emergency of the recovery against the COVID-19 crisis. So the message is clear, not only to the European power, but also the national one, the local and regional. It's time to deliver.
Roosevelt. We have nothing to fear but the fear itself. And I think this is time for a progressive agenda. On the other side of the Atlantic, Joe Biden does it.
Yes.
And we also have it.
That's a big responsibility. It's up to you.
And you.
Yeah, it's up to everybody. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks to the speakers also connected. Thank you very much as well to have all your input on that panel. Let us move on to the next panel, and as we do make that shift, we're going to have to be cleaning as we do for the COVID crisis. We have to clean the stands as well. We are moving on to some keynote inspirational speeches on sustainable well-being for all and the social dimension of the green and digital transitions. How do we make that transition in a fair way? And in some ways we saw with the yellow vests that we were trying to make a green transition in France, and it backfired. How do we address the social aspect to avoid some kind of backlash in making this digital transition and the green transition? Tech tips, I might remind you, if you hear a good soundbite, please cast it wider with the hashtag EU Social Summit 21 and hashtag social rights. And we are going to try to stay closer to time. Time is flying, but all the very important points made. But in any case, speakers, please do keep that in mind. I'd like to first introduce my two guests here in the studio, here in Porto, live. It's amazing to be together in the context. Luca Vicentini, General Secretary of the European Trade Union Confederation, ITUC. Buongiorno, buonasera. And Pedro Marques, S&D Group Vice President and member of the European Parliament. We see each other again. We did a webcast earlier this week in Brussels, and we're back again.
Yes,
but before I get to the two of you, I need to talk to Teresa Ribera. Teresa, you're Deputy Prime Minister of Spain, co-chair of the Independent Commission for Sustainable Equality. And that's interesting that you're actually working with the former Prime Minister of Denmark, Poul Rasmussen, on this Independent Commission for Sustainable Equality. I think it's quite interesting because I just might mention as a footnote, it's thanks to Rasmussen, Mr. Rasmussen, that the Maastricht Treaty was approved in Denmark, and that was a very key thing that led to the euro, of course, and to the further integration of the EU. And this is where, Teresa, you're working with Paul to bring about sustainable equality. Tell us about that, Teresa.
Hello, good afternoon. This is small pressure, so it must be inspirational, sustainable well-being, and so many things at the same time. And as you were saying, yes, I'm co-leading with Paul a very interesting exercise on what next, how to combine all these references. I think that Paul has contributed along the years, as it has been the case for our political family, trying to move forward in an inclusive and fair manner what we want to build in Europe along the last decades, but along the last years too. And most of what we have been witnessing around the green understanding of well-being has social democrat progressive signature, as it has been the case for Pedro Timmermans and in the council, João Pedro. So I think that it has been quite interesting what we have been promoting, what we have been investing in, and what we have been trying to do is to think what next, what type of big challenges and how we can address this very important combination of the social and green interlinkages in the future to build. In a very particular situation, because this year we have been fronted to the fact that we are much more vulnerable of what we could think, and we need to recover, to rebuild an economy and a society that has been touched, has been harmed by a deep pandemic. And this has driven us into something which is quite primary. Very important words that remind us of around us. We have been talking about public services, health system, public coverage, environmental challenges and environmental weakness, interdependence among the different countries of the world, but also within the societies. And this inspires us on how we can build next this big transformation, and this has been commented in the previous session. We know that we have a very important opportunity to transform the future we want to build, to make it stronger, more inclusive, fairer, or more sustainable. This is something not only possible, but pretty necessary. but it deserves strong political energy, paying attention not just on the big macroeconomic pictures, but paying attention to the microeconomic effects, so the distributional effects, the fears that people can feel, and the different ways people understand the big menaces and the big opportunities. So taking into consideration these demands of big, important, strong dialogue between us, policymakers, and the society, as well as the members of the academia that are investing in this type of effects. This is the work that we have been trying to pursue with the intention to deliver the Sustainable Human and Planetary Wellbeing report coming from our group, with a comprehensive understanding, a comprehensive roadmap that inspires the European socialist projects in the journey towards sustainable human and planetary well-being, taking into consideration that green is important, but it is even more important that in this transformation we take into consideration the transactional divergences or unfairness or vulnerabilities we may be facing that can deal with energy poverty, that can deal with the big transformation of the labor market and the skills that need to be taken into consideration and being promoted. And then the social policies together with the environmental policies strengthening the economic response. We have the duty of proposing these new
you mentioned
audacious proposals to our European colleagues, and we are reasonably optimistic on how they can be welcomed by the society on its own. There is an additional comment to be made, which is the external dimension of our work. I think that the importance of Europe being credible elsewhere relies also on the credibility of Europe at home, but it works the other way around. Being credible at home also implies taking into consideration the effects of our external policies when we work with partners and with other players. We're very small, interdependent work.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you very much. Let me. You talked about this transformation in the labor market. I'm sure I want to shift over to Luca Vicentini over at the European Trade Union Confederation. This shift in the labor market, in the way we work, and the digitalization, it requires change in how societies approach work, and how companies approach work, and how workers their protections must evolve, like for instance the right to disconnect, right?
Well, Chris, yes, but I mean, we should stop telling workers in Europe all the time that they have to change, because they have been already through 4 crises: globalization and financiarization of the economy, then the financial and economic crisis, then the austerity period, then now COVID, and now they have to face other crises: climate change, digitalization, with no protection. Well, this is not the scenario we can design for workers in the future. That's why I think that in the Social Summit, with an action plan for the European Pillar of Social Rights, the first things that we all must do is to give a message of hope about the future to working people in this continent.
And then concretely, what does that mean in the declaration that the summit should arrive at? What concretely should it have to improve working conditions?
Well, first of all, there are 3 targets, 3 headline targets in this action plan, and they are quite important because the targets are increasing the level of employment, quality jobs, I would say, not just employment. We need really to ensure quality jobs for everybody. Second, making sure that people are equipped with the right skills to face the climate, digital, and economic transition. And third, last but not least, making sure that we can lift people out of poverty through better wages, better working conditions, and social protection. But to achieve these targets, we need tools. And there it comes an action plan. 4 things at least: money, the money of the Recovery and Resilience Funds, of the MFF, all this has to go to achieve these targets. Then we need good laws, because we don't have enough good laws to make sure that we can have decent wages, decent working conditions, etc. Third, we need to change our economic model, because with the current fiscal rules, it's impossible to achieve these targets. The current fiscal rules are old-fashioned austerity based. So we have really to reform.
You mean about fiscal rules, about government spending?
Absolutely. And fourth, and last but not least for us, social dialogue, collective bargaining, involvement of social partners. These four factors are the ones that can make a difference in achieving these three targets, I think.
Okay. Let me shift over to Pedro Marques, S&D Group Vice President, member of the European Parliament. You're on the Committee of Regional Development, also the Subcommittee on Taxation. A couple of questions for you. One is, though, there is headwind that this summit is going into, because there are 11 countries of the 27 that signed a letter saying they're saying basically hands off some of these policies. These are national policies, you don't touch them. I'll quote from the letter: respect national authority over policy making in areas such as labor, employment, pensions, education, childcare. How do you counter that at a summit?
Boa tarde, bem-vindos ao Porto, a Matosinhos.
Good afternoon. Welcome to my country, to this beautiful city of Matosinhos. It is inspiration like this that we need, so that the European leaders might bring more in terms of increasing social pillar. Due to the Stefan Löfven's work in Gothenburg, after the priority by Antonio Costa with the Porto summit, and the work by Nicola Smith in the European Summit on the Action Plan, we have the opportunity of doing more in the social pillar. And what I say to these European leaders who have doubts is that if we should have the countries, member state per member state, to do what is missing in terms of labor markets, in terms of fighting child poverty, if we have conditions to do what we are supposed to do in terms of gender equality at the salary level, if each country could do that alone, they would have done that for sure. European citizens launched a challenge upon us. 9 out of 10 European citizens said priority to the social pillar and social rights. And we must deliver results. And I have specific ideas that we must put on the field to deliver this action plan by Nicolas. It is not acceptable that in Europe, after so many years, one of the most developed continents of the world, that is supposed as so many children in extreme poverty. And I think that we must do more what is missing now, what we did not before in the past, to fight this extreme poverty. 150 euros per month is enough to remove 5 million children living in extreme poverty in Europe. Europe can do that. And if the member states could do that by themselves, they would do that already. So let us do that all together within the European pillar and within the action plan by Nicolas. With Antonio Costa leadership in the Council and the strength after this social summit, we can do different to deliver results up to by 2030 with less child poverty.
Question that I would like to ask from the audience. I mean, it's very difficult to get the questions because the time is flying, but I could ask one question actually to Luca. Luca, there's an elderly person saying, well, you do talk a lot about unemployment for youth, but what about for me? I'm elderly, and it's hard for elderly people to find work. How should they be helped by this summit?
Yeah, exactly, because we have, for sure, a lot of young people that are not offered any job after being trained for so long and very well, but then they are unemployed. But we have also, and when they are offered a job, by the way, is very often precarious, but then we have people that have been got out from the labor market because of restructuring processes, because of climate change, digitalization, and cannot find any other opportunity. Yeah. So boosting active labor market policies, making sure that there is money enough to create new jobs in the communities where these jobs have been disrupted, this is really the crucial element. When we talk about just transition, we don't mean just reskilling people, because if you are 55, 60 years old, you can be reskilled, but then if you don't have any offer for for a decent job, you are just lost in the labor market. So we really need to have targeted policies with correct investment, targeted investment to create new jobs, offer these new jobs to the people in the communities, and making sure they can be accompanied through social protection and training towards a better condition. And then we don't have to forget that we have also the pensioners, and the pensioners have been seeing their lives destroyed by the pandemic and before that by the economic crisis. Pension reforms was the mantra to adjust public budgets in each and every country of the European Union. This is no more what we have to do. We have to, on the contrary, to guarantee everybody a decent salary, a decent income, or a decent pension. So these are the elements that must be part of the action plan for the pillar. And as was said before, member states have to commit, because 3.5 years has passed after Gothenburg. 20 fantastic principles in the pillar, but at national level, very little implementation. The European Commission has delivered a lot of legislative initiatives in the meantime, but member states are still blocking this implementation. I will tell tomorrow to the leaders at the end of the social summit, when we will have to deliver our statement to support the joint declaration, I will tell them, you have signed a letter telling us that you want respect for national prerogatives. But when national prerogatives means very well working systems, nobody wants to touch them. But when the systems at national level are just generating divergence, dumping, and unfair competition, we have to get rid of that. We have to stop all this. This is not a single market. This is not a social market economy that we want to build. So there must be responsibility and solidarity. Otherwise, we don't go anywhere for anybody in Europe.
Thank you, Luca. Let me shift over to Teresa. I have a question, Teresa, from the audience. Are you ready? The question from Tony on Facebook says, the theme here is for a fair recovery. How can this happen when capitalism continues to fail the weak, the poor, the homeless, the unemployed, with rents being increased and incomes falling? I might just mention, too, though, that you have a transition policy in Spain to ensure fair and inclusive ecological transition. So maybe it is possible if we evolve policy, right?
I think I share much of what it has been stated by Luca, but not all. I think that we also need to work on the ground. I think that we need a regulation and a political commitment towards this fairness and the correction of this imbalance in many circumstances in this quick transition that takes place right now, and in order to prevent further damage in the time to come if we do not pay attention today. But at the same time, people is not waiting for a proposal to say no, but needs to be involved in the concrete responsibilities and in the creation of the opportunities. So what we have done, and I have to say that it has been quite intense, is that when we had to face the fact that 85% of our coal installed power capacity was going to be phased out in less than 3 years, and this is, I can assure you, quite a complicated issue in terms of social impact, not in terms of economic or environmental impact, but yes, in terms of social impact. We need to be sure that we have the mechanism, regulatory mechanism, and finance, public finance mechanism, including social policies that can cover people and villages, but can also be available to invest in new options in the same neighborhoods, in the same cities, in the same regions where this industrial life collapses. And in order to build the responses, we need to take into consideration what people want for their own future. So it is quite intense in terms of facilitating this discussion. We come along with you. The mechanisms are already there, but it is important that we can facilitate a broader debate on how you see the opportunities that you have in front of you because of the endogenous resources. You can count on that. And there is something that Luca has also said that I think it is important. It is not just a question of re-skilling. Re-skilling can be important for many of these workers if we have the opportunities of new employment being created in the surroundings. But it is also important to pay attention to the children, to the daughters and sons of these workers in these villages, because for them, the future they were building, or they were prepared for, is not going to take place under the same circumstances. But we cannot allow this additional big empty black hole in the places where they used to live. So we need to have positive incentives and capacity to break the gap that could be growing up in these regions through an additional effort to provide means, education, opportunities, and skilling, not just reskilling, but skilling the young generations of these villages, so to ensure that there can be other possibilities in the same region if they want to stay.
Thanks, Teresa. I'd like to shift over to Hélène Fritzon. Are you still with us, Hélène? You still online? Can we shift over to Hélène? Yes, you're still there. Great. And I think we talked about this during a webcast a couple of weeks ago, but tell us a little bit more about what you would like to see tomorrow in this Porto Summit about promoting gender equality. What specifically would you like to be said in that Porto Declaration about gender equality? Closing the gap.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Chris. And I will. All the speakers have spoken about existing inequalities, and they have increased, both between generations, between workers, between member states, regions, but as well as between men and women. And I really look forward, because we must push for gender equality in almost all areas of life, in all our world. Achievements linked to gender equality are being rolled back, and this is unacceptable. And you know, before the crisis, 1/3 of all European women do not have their own job, and the situation is harder during the crisis, because women are hit harder, and we know that women are also at the front line, so they are more affected also in their work. So I really hope that the negotiations tomorrow, they will be clear, and they will send a clear message. They will have clear targets and concrete actions, so we can step up our efforts to fight discrimination, violence, and that we can close the gender gaps in employment, but also in pay and pensions. Because we need to say to the young generation that we take responsibility for your future, and therefore we need a strong welfare state in all the member states, and we need public services, and we need to push for all these very important issues about gender equality, and of course a green economy, a green society. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hélène. I'd like to have one final question, right over to you. That the question of taxation, because Manuel, you're on that subcommittee on taxation, and we've talked about this before, you and I, about the digital tax. So probably a lot of leaders tomorrow are going to be saying, how are we going to pay for all this? Well, they're going to have to raise money through different ways, and maybe what is the chance that we can have a digital tax soon?
Well, I think there is a bigger chance now. We have had, as Europe, we took important decisions on creating this kind of new taxes, and plus putting them as own resources for the European budget, so not just then handing all the money away to the member states, because we do need to strengthen the European budget so that we can do all those things that we referred to at the European level, and not always only counting on the member states. And yes, it is more feasible now, because the Biden administration is now on board as well for this new corporate taxation, fairer corporate taxation, so that the big multinationals of the digital, and not just the digital, they would pay a fair share of taxes. And also, what we are doing at the OECD level also goes into the direction of these offshores that we have all around the world. This has to stop, right? And this is also the kind of negotiation we are having at the OECD level. So all of this will create, hopefully, more resources, a fairer taxation, because we do need, as you said, the resources to finance the recovery, and I mean to finance these policies when we want to tackle child poverty, to finance the Green Deal, because that also needs resources. So
Right.
we need that, and now we have a path, we have an idea, a concrete idea that we are discussing and approving, hopefully, at the OECD level, and then we have to implement it here in Europe. And I mean, I wouldn't like to see any excuse by any member state saying, no, I don't want these taxes to go higher because I compete through taxes. That's unacceptable. Competition within Europe through taxation is completely unacceptable, because that's just a race to the bottom that is impeding us to have decent pensions, to have decent child guarantees, child benefits. No, we do not accept any kind of race to the bottom, and we will not accept that from any member state.
No race to the bottom. There's a hashtag quote, okay. We can pose a couple more questions because we're waiting for the next panel to get all of our high-level people together. It's taking a little bit of time, so I'm going to go over to Luca again. And in a recent webcast, I talked with Thea Jark, who is Itak Youth.
Yeah.
Thea Jark. And I asked her about this Future of Work report that her group released. And it has a number of aspects that actually could apply to not just to youth, but to others. I mean, about the gig economy, about rights related to digitalization, such as the right to disconnect, lifelong learning, as we talked about with the elderly question, the person from the elderly person, and the idea of rights for trainees who have these internships that just continue to roll over and they don't get paid or get paid very much. What would you like to see in this Porto Declaration that addresses that kind of thing, these concerns that were raised in the Future of Work report?
Yeah, well, I mean, the perspective of Thea, as all the other young people in Europe, is exactly to guarantee a decent future for them in terms of work. And of course, if we continue just proposing to have precarious jobs or endless training with no pay, that's exactly not the future that we have to build up. Of course, we have to take into account the transformations that are going to happen in the labor market, because climate change, digitalization, now telework, and many other things, I mean, that are happening all around are going to have an influence, I mean, in reshaping the labor market. And we cannot even imagine that we will have only one kind of working contract or working status. So the problem is how we really guarantee that everybody, wherever is the working status, wherever is the sector or the type of work they are performing, can have a decent job. And having a decent job means having, as I said before, a decent salary, and this can be achieved only through strong minimum wages and strong collective bargaining. It means having their health and safety protected, and this can be achieved only through decent legal frameworks with obligations and sanctions, and this means having also a decent social protection. Yeah. And by the way, the ILO, in the Commission for the Future of Work,
International
Labour
Labour Organization,
exactly, we want a global social protection fund and a social contract at global level. This is exactly what we need to shape a decent future of work for everybody.
Okay, well, but what about this youth guarantee? Been talk about that for quite some time. Where are we with that? A youth guarantee being that if a youth is out of a job or out of school, they should have some kind of offer of a job or education or internship within 4 months. There's been a lot of talk about that. Where are we now with that?
Well, we know perfectly how it went, the first wave of the youth guarantee. These offers came, but they were just for training or traineeship, never for a job. And why? Just because the first edition of the youth guarantee was based on the economic policies that were implemented at that moment. And at that moment, we were implementing a jobless recovery. All the money was invested just for profits and productivity. And there was no attention and no focus on job creation. So the second wave of the youth guarantee that is starting now, thanks to Nicola Schmidt and to the different frameworks that surround around, let's say, the second youth guarantee, these measures have to make sure that we can also offer jobs, decent jobs to young people, and the only way to do it is to change the economic policy and focus on investment for job creation.
Okay, and in this summit, in this Porto summit, how would you like to see that youth guarantee strengthened?
Well, it's exactly about making sure that the targets of the pillar, employment in particular, means job creation, and that job creation is financed through the multi-annual financial framework and through the investment that is contained in the recovery strategy of the European Union. But this means that the economic policy must serve job creation, must serve social protection, must serve public services. The money has to go where it's needed, and where it's needed now is to recreate our social model.
Pedro Marquez, one other question, Pedro, about regional development, because you are on that committee on regional development. How do you address that concern in this Porto Declaration, in what's going to be talked about the next day?
It is actually foreseen that this is one of the important discussions, and we do hope that the regional dimension of the transitions is well handled in this declaration, because there is a regional dimension and there is an issue with regional cohesion that will arise from the Green Deal, the green transition, the digital transition, because the impact in different regions is completely different. In rural areas, in urban areas, in most remote areas in Europe, the impacts are completely different.
Yeah, there's
when you talk about transportation,
a huge gap.
Cost of transportation, cost of energy, all of that. So obviously, if there is a different impact from region to region, there must be also a way to address it differently. That's what we did recently with the Just Transition Fund. And I think that's exactly what we need to do more from now on, because the resources for the Just Transition Fund are really limited. We need more, and we need the same paradigm, this idea of a fair transition being supported also by European funding. Now that we have more policies on energy, on transport that will impact people's lives differently, we need regional policy to step up. That's what also I expect from the declaration of the summit tomorrow.
Okay, and a lot of people are saying this is a crucial moment in the middle of the COVID crisis. We need a social aspect for this recovery to happen in a fair way, to rebuild fairly, to make this digital transition fair, to make the green transition fair. How much do you think this Porto Declaration can address that?
I mean, it really should, because for a while now we didn't have this opportunity. The momentum is created because Antonio Costa brought this back from Gothenburg. Nicola Schmidt presented at the correct timing the action plan. So the conditions are there now. We need the prime ministers, we need the governments to commit to this European approach, to this going back to welfare state, to this going back to social policy as a priority. Let me give you an example of what we need now, and not for the future, for now. We are discussing now with the Commission, every member state is discussing the national recovery plans. We have targets for green policies at the national recovery plans. We have targets for digital policies at the national recovery plans. This is the moment now to put also ambitious targets to the social dimension at the national recovery plans, because we won't get a second opportunity. That's where the money is now, and that's where we need the money to come to handle the social consequences of the transitions, and by the way, the social consequences of this crisis. That's why this is the moment. This is really the moment to get it.
And in the S&D declaration, there's wording in there, I don't have it right in front of me, but something about how if we want a sustainable Europe, we must strengthen the social aspect. If we fail at this, could that put the EU in question in the long run?
Certainly the ambition for, we as a group, but the Europe as a whole, we went all in on the Green Deal. We put all there, it's our new growth strategy, which is correct. But as we have seen in France, if you put those policies about the green transition forward, but you don't handle at the same time the social consequences, you won't get the transition, you just get the gilets jaunes.
Yeah. Voilà.
Franz Timmermans has said correctly that either the transition is fair or there won't be any transition at all, and I concur with him. We need to put the social dimension from the beginning of the transitions. And there was a question, by the way, from one of the people that you put to Luca about the elderly workers.
Yeah.
That's another great example on the digitalization, on the digital transition. It's happening now.
Yeah.
And yes, the elderly workers are more at risk on that transition. We need to address that now. They need to be reskilled, and we need to create jobs at the local communities even, for those people to have a real opportunity. So that's why this is the moment. We created the moment. Antonio Costa brought us all to Porto. Now we have to deliver. It would be a huge frustration for Europe if we couldn't get it. So I'm really confident that tomorrow the Prime Ministers understand, and obviously the day after, that this is the moment to deliver.
Hashtag now we have to deliver.
Yeah.
I'm throwing that in
right.
somewhere. Pedro, thank you very much. Thank you also to Teresa, to Luca as well. Thank you very much for this panel. And let's wrap this up and go to the final panel as well. Good luck tomorrow in your talks as well. Thank you. And again, observing the COVID regulations, we're going to prepare the podiums for this final closing session called Sustainable Wellbeing Starts Now. Starts now. It kind of reminds me of that old Smith song, How Soon Is Now? How soon is now? And when the leaders talk tomorrow, maybe they should be asked, how soon is now? We're going to have, please, if you could join us, we're a very strong, a very powerful picture tonight to close with.
Hello.
Hello, welcome.
Hello.
I'm sorry I can't shake hands, but to have the mayor of Paris, to have two prime ministers, is quite a powerful picture. Quite a powerful picture to send with a message to the 27 leaders tomorrow that these people mean it. They mean it. That something has to be done tomorrow during this summit. And I'd like to first, introduce everybody. Stefan Löfven, the Prime Minister of Sweden, welcome. You're also leader of the Swedish Social Democratic Party, welcome. Anne Hidalgo, Mayor of Paris, bonjour. Antonio Costa, again, Prime Minister of Portugal, welcome back, yeah? No, wait a minute. Antonio, you're over there. I'm getting it mixed up.
No problem.
So sorry. Antonio, you switched.
It's vulgar.
I see. Right. Sergei, you threw me off. All right. Sergei Stanishev, President of the PES, we saw you earlier. And Irache. Welcome back, Irache. Garcia Perez, President of the S&D Group, welcome. So this is the final call to action by some of the top figures in Europe on what should be done about this social aspect of the way the EU operates, about the European Union operates. Let me begin with Anne Hidalgo. Quel est le point de vue du social, de la perspective d'une mère d'une...
We shall start with the mayor of Paris with a strong social and environmental connection. Thank you very much for the invitation to be here and the invitation by to Antonio Costa to bring this subject to the discussion during the Portuguese presidency, this strong message of connection between the social and the transition at the level of the digital and the environment. Our perspective ahead of us is a very important one. We know that we are living a historic moment, not just for Europe, but also the whole world as well. The pandemic, in a way, was a complete revolution for our social system. And so it is a unique opportunity of introducing specific policies to have a compromise, a change of, within our economy to a green economy. The so-called Green Deal is an excellent news for the European citizens and the European cities as well. And we also have the fact that without social aspects, without work together with the middle class and supporting the weakest ones, we will not open our way, we will not identify our way. And the perspective of the cities, and this is why I'm here, we need a strong alliance, an alignment at different levels of governance. At the European level, it was a real revolutionary plan within the member states. And of course, within their autonomy, they must follow their economic and social change. They both are hand in hand, otherwise nothing happens at the local level. And I stress here, if we want these guidelines and these visions leveraged by the European Union may be applied in the daily life of the European citizens so that they may be players and champions of this Europe. There must be something specific, concrete. We must work so that in order to evolve the cities, because they represent a governance system at a wider scale. This is very important to create this convergence between the vision of the entrepreneurs, the companies, the private sector, the public policies by the member states, and also the adhesion and the mobilization of the citizens, regardless of they being integrated in the labor market. Mobilization is very important, but all the others who try to find out solutions, because we have very creative solutions, citizens all over Europe, and we must put together all these levels of management and governance in order to provide a more direct connection between the cities and the EU.
Table tomorrow with 26 other leaders. How much do you think that the elements of the S&D declaration on social issues can be integrated into that Porto declaration on the social aspect?
To a large extent, and I expect, because we need a clear social dimension into everything what we do. Look, the whole economy, societies, everything is built on ordinary people's work. It's labor. So I think it's obvious that we need a much stronger social dimension to just put people at the very center. So no matter what we talk about, we need to think, how do we improve people's lives? Because for too long time, this cooperation, which is very important, I mean, the European Union, for too long time has been regarded for something for the capital flow, the goods flow, which is good because we need it. But that's our means. That's a tool for us. But at the very center, how do we improve people's lives? So I expect it to be very, very close aligned.
How much do you think we could perhaps see a child guarantee, a stronger youth guarantee, a minimum wage, EU-wide?
Well, as perhaps many know, a European minimum wage is not exactly my medicine. I think we need to improve minimum wages. We need to improve. So when we develop our economies, of course, workers, employees need to improve their living standard. That's important. Exactly how we do that, in my view, we should manage that. We have a Portuguese culture.
a Swedish culture, a German, and so on. But we, because the point with the social, the pillar was to build upon 20 principles and then act from our different national cultures, traditions, but to follow them and measure and see how do we proceed. But I do also see that we need some minimum standards. Working environment is such a subject, I think, where we need to have a closer limit.
Prime Minister Costa, you are also going to be sitting at that table tomorrow, and congratulations for organizing this, by the way, and having the rotating EU presidency, and for inviting us here, actually. Thank you very much. How optimistic are you that the aspects from the S&D declaration can be worked into the Porto Declaration?
Bom, muito obrigado a todos.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Thank you very much. Thank you for having invited me to be here. I would like to thank the S&D group for the support given to the Portuguese presidency and the different outcomes we have managed to achieve together with the European Parliament. I think the social summit and the European social pillar is a major outcome, a major winning of our family. In 2017, Stefan organized in Gothenburg a summit where it was possible to proclaim the 20 principles of the social pillar. March 2020, Nicola Schmidt, the Socialist Commissioner, presented the action plan that was missing to implement the principles and to implement the principles. And we are then under a Portuguese presidency that by chance is the socialist one, that tomorrow might be celebrated by a historic moment where for the first time we will have a tripartite agreement at European level, joining trade unions, associations representing companies, civil society, subscribing all together with the European Parliament President and the European Commission, the Porto Declaration, the Porto Commitment on the social pillar. And hopefully after tomorrow, the Commission will endorse it. I think that our political family has good reasons to be proud of from these results. We have principles, we have an action plan, we will have a social support that will be signed and a commitment in terms of executing the action plan, and then we have an open road to execute the action plan, and of course the action plan will unfold according to different dimensions. It will be present in all the policies. The different recovery and resilience plans that we are preparing must take into account the action plan for social rights. We have different initiatives. One was already presented, others will be presented in the future that will put in practice the action plan. Others are more consensual, others are not so consensual. For example, the wage transparency to fight the wage gap between men and women. Another important one, the joining work life and personal life. But this action plan is above all very important to be successful when it comes to the major EU policies. We know that this rebuilding is based on the green and digital transition. But we must take into account also that for having successful transitions, our social pillar must be strong, investing on training, on upskills, reskillings of people so that all European citizens may join this transition, to invest on science and innovation so that our companies may be more and more competitive, and also guarantee a strong social protection so that nobody is left behind. This transition is paramount, but it has risks. It entails risks. Digital transition will increase automation. It will give us more free time for workers, releasing workers from not so creative tasks that will be done by machines, but we must give them, these people, opportunities to have other opportunities in life in order so that they are not left behind. Green transition is also paramount. Portugal is proud of having the best conditions to achieve the 55% reduction. But we have costs. A few months ago, we closed here in Matosinhos oil refinery. It's a major advantage for reducing CO2 emissions, but we must respond to the necessities of providing jobs to the people that worked here, and they must move into new jobs. So this social pillar in terms of training, employment, and poverty fighting is very important. And honestly, I think that if we are proud of this work by the family, the socialist family is this one. And I'd like to congratulate Stefan that in 2017 he managed to gather most of the European leaders in Gothenburg to proclaim the 20 principles of this pillar. So we are giving one further step ahead, and we will have other steps for sure, namely in the next Swedish presidency in 2022 or 23, I'm not sure.
Gothenburg in Sweden. How does it feel to get from Gothenburg to Porto? As far as this goes, the social...
It feels great. And I'm very glad that you, Antonio, took this torch and you took it from Gothenburg to Porto. And by doing so, you made it stronger. The pillars are stronger with this action. So, and this action plan that we're now deciding upon and acting of is making this stronger. And as I said, when we took the decision in Gothenburg, we had one kind of situation, and we still felt the effects of the financial crisis. Actually, we did that. And we saw that people were mistrusting politics in general. And we said, we need to show that this is for the people. This cooperation is basically for the people. So with these principles, we could, as I said earlier, we could advance that. But what you're doing now, Antonio, with this is that you're taking it a step further. You're making it stronger. And of course, during our presidency, we have an election 2022. We're going to win for the third time. And during that presidency, we can advance this even further, because now, given this crisis, what we need to do now with or the recovery, building back better, all this must include a social dimension, because otherwise people won't be there. And now we need. I just want to tell you one thing more. I had a meeting with the committee in the Parliament yesterday, because we always need that before we go to European councils. And I can tell you that the Conservatives were very, very irritated. And they said, look what you've done, you're destroying Europe with this social pillar. Are you proud? And I said, yes, I'm very proud. Because this is exactly what Europe needs now. So, and our family, I think we should be proud of what we're doing, because it's our values, it's our way of thinking, and putting people first and in the middle. That's the result that we have. But this is social democratic and socialist values that we are developing into a strategy for people.
Madame la maire, Anne, si je pourrais me permettre de vous demander.
What would be your message? Madame Han Hidalgo, for tomorrow to help achieve the goals. How can we facilitate the work that needs to be done tomorrow? Europe has a new vision, And in responding to the pandemic crisis, we see that Europe needs to be more agile and swift in implementing its policies. If citizens cannot see real results, and of course, that for that we need the heads of state. Otherwise, we would be wasting time and wasting a perfect opportunity where we need an absolute commitment. And together, we need to achieve the transitions, be it at climate level, be it at employment, and also the employment resulting from the climate shift, from the shift that we'll have in employment as a result of the new policies to face climate change. So, for example, workers in the fossil fuel sector will need new opportunities. We will need to support workers nationwide. And what we see is that the middle class has been weakened, is really taken on all of the burden in terms of taxes, uncertainty, quality of life, education. The middle class is facing a lot of uncertainty in all countries of the European Union and of OECD. And when that happens, the democratic social system is weakened. So we need policies that establish a social dialogue between unions and employers. And we cannot forget the transition of the social Europe of Jacques Delors. That's what Mr. Antonio Costa is doing, but to act in cities. The Green Deal at European level, for example, and the cities that are more agile and more swift, that can enable change easier than member states. We need to be pragmatic. I think that is a territory big bang that we need. Europe is here to keep up with these new ways to cooperate at European, national, and regional level. Unions also need to have this big bang of proximity. Europe needs to do it because it's going to deliver more efficiency in terms of all of the ambitious policies that we have on the table for the entire Europe. So a big bang of proximity is a great expression.
We need to wrap this up, Irache. I think this was quite a productive discussion from the grassroots, from the people on the front line and policymakers, sending a strong message to the leaders tomorrow.
Of course. Muy rápidamente me vais a permitir.
Very briefly, before concluding, allow me to thank everyone who enabled this event and this meeting here today. The staff of PES and of the S&D group, all of the speakers who participated. And PES is really highlighting the importance of all of these topics. And I would also like to thank the dear Prime Minister Antonio Costa. Without him, it wouldn't be possible. And Stefan as well, thank you. It's not by chance that Socialists and Democrats are here today debating these issues before the formal event of the social summit with citizens, unions, civil society. It's a clear message of commitment of social democracy, of building with citizens the Europe that we want. More and better Europe that meets the aspirations of what people want, because we are here to improve the lives of people. We have fought for a long time, we have worked for a long time to improve the economic context, but now we need all of these developments to be consolidated in a fair way. We have big challenges. The climate transition, the green transition, the digital transition, without leaving anyone behind. The vulnerable cannot be the ones to foot the bill of all of these, in fact, transitions. It's now an obligation to fight climate change and to have digitization, but only through democracy can we do that. We have to lead with social policies to strengthen welfare and to have a more equal Europe for men and women. So it's social democracy that will deliver a green, fair and feminist Europe. It's a big challenge, and we have just taken another step forward, and I invite you all to continue to contribute with your ideas, your debates, your proposals, because this is a path that we will build together, social democracy with citizens. Thank you. Thank you.
From Sergei Stanislav Stanishev, that I guess, as David Sassoli, the President of Parliament, was saying earlier, he'd like to see a new beginning, that tomorrow could be a new beginning. What would you like to see tomorrow? How do you sum up what we talked about today, connecting those dots, like Irache said, of the digital aspect, of the green transition, of gender equality? There are so many dots to connect tomorrow.
There are indeed, but you know, the most important conclusion which I make for myself listening to the whole debate is that all these women and men, they didn't shy away from difficult decisions. Because I'm quite confident that for Stefan life would be easier if back in 2007 he would not raise the issue of a social summit in Gothenburg. But he did it. I'm sure also that for Antonio it was a big challenge, political, diplomatic, to go ahead in the Portuguese presidency with this proposal. I know for sure that without the group, we wouldn't have the action plan from the Commission, because it was one of the conditions of the S&D group to support the Commission. We want a social action plan based on the 20 principles. I'm confident that for our mayors of big cities, smaller cities like Anne Hidalgo, it is vital to have social Europe, because we socialists created the welfare state in our homes, in our national states. And we are seeing the deficits in Europe. We are seeing inequalities rising. We are seeing that people are not sure about their future. They want economic protection. And what we are trying to do, and we are doing together with all the efforts, with all the stakeholders in the family, is step by step, methodically coming back to social Europe. So for tomorrow, I'm very optimistic, but we have to be cautious, because you know, when you climb a mountain, the last dozens of meters are the most dangerous. So we don't have to sleep. We have to reach the peak and open a new chapter. After Gothenburg, the chapter of Porto, and then move ahead, forward and forward, achieving more social Europe and bringing back hope to the citizens. That's about it.
Sergei, thank you very much. Thank you also to Anne and Stefan, Antonio, Irache, thank you. And thank you to all of those who participated tonight, and all of you who also listened in and sent in your questions. It's been a very inspiring evening, and I think that will, hopefully, that energy will transfer tomorrow at the beginning of the Porto Summit on the social pillar. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Muchas gracias.